Psychology research shows us that almost everything we think that will make us happier doesn't. The biggest lie we've been sold is that more money will make us happier, will make our lives more enriched, and will solve all of our problems. But what if the science proves otherwise? When I was doing the Yale Science of Wellbeing course, I was deeply shocked by what I learned. So today, I want to walk you through the biggest myths about money and happiness and what the science actually says. Hello, my name is Sim. I am an angel and venture investor. And the first myth when it comes to your happiness is that you will feel content when you get a pay rise. Have you ever thought about what would really make you happy in the next 5 to 10 years? The lecturer in my class asked this exact question, and the answers were probably things that you would think of right now, things that kind of make sense. Things like, well, I'd like to have a nice house. I'd like to have a big home. For me, I'd love to have a home by the beach. Or it could be that I want a really nice car, or I want to be able to retire with lots of money in my bank account. And more often, it's also that we want a really good paycheck. We want a really good job. And so we work super hard for that promotion. We grind through things. And even when times feel quite frustrating or tough or annoying, you try to imagine that nicer life to keep yourself going. But in her research of happiness, psychologist Sonja Lyubomirsky asked people a simple question in 2008. She said, how much money do you think you would need to feel happy? And the answer was both interesting and kind of depressing. She found that if someone was earning $30,000, like it's not a lot of money, it's enough to get them by. And around 2008, maybe that was around minimum wage. They wanted to have a happier life. They wanted to be making $50,000. That seems pretty reasonable. You could achieve a lot more. You could have a lot less worry. Every time you get bills coming in, you wouldn't be stressing about if you could afford them or not. You wouldn't be asking your landlord if you could defer rent this month. Life seems a lot easier. So then she asked people who were making $100,000 a year. These people were making double what the first group would even wish for. And she asked them, how much would they need? Would they also need another $20,000 to be happy? Would they need another $50,000 to be happy? And it was really interesting. They didn't want $120,000. They didn't want $150,000. The people that were making $100,000 a year back in 2008 said that they needed $250,000 to be happier. And she realized it wasn't the actual amount of money that mattered. And in fact, it's just the gap between what you have and what you think you need. And the gap rarely closes because the more we earn, the more we convince ourselves that we need more. We need a better life. You get a promotion and you go, oh my God, well, now I'm a manager. A manager should dress better. A manager should have nicer clothes. A manager should have nicer shoes. A manager needs like a better briefcase. And it's time to upgrade from my drugstore makeup to some fancier makeup, my basic skincare to, some Tatcha moisturizer. And so rather than kind of being content with the gap closing between what we earn and what we thought we needed, that gap just continues to grow. And the second myth that was quite surprising is that earning more money will make you happier. It was a myth that I grew up with and probably thought until very recently. And I really found myself struggling with this one because growing up, you get told money won't make you happy. And when you don't grow up with money, you think to yourself, well, I feel like people are just saying that because I would like to have nicer things. I'm sure it would make me more happy. I'm sure I would not feel sad if I was able to go to a store and not have to look at the cost of things or not stress out when I go out with my friends and look at the bill and go, oh my God, can we itemize this because I do not want to be paying for other people's drinks. That doesn't sound like a bad life to me. But a 2010 very well-known study, and you might have actually come across this yourself. The study was done by two Princeton researchers, Daniel Kahneman and Angus Dearton, and they found that people tended to feel a lot more happier the more money they made, but only up to a certain point. So they figured out that certain point where your happiness increased and then kind of leveled off was around $75,000 a year per person. And so you would have heard this thrown around online or in articles, but it's really important to understand that was in 2010, and $75,000 in 2010 was very different to what $75,000 now could be worth and what it can buy you. It doesn't have the same value because of inflation. And so when you adjust for inflation, I did some calculations and realized that really $75,000 a year per person in today's money is more like 115,000 US dollars per year per person. And so in a household, that's looking at around 230,000 US dollars a year. And that's a lot of money. That is a lot of money to live off. And that can definitely provide you all of your creature comforts. You can have a home. You can send your kids to a very decent school. You can have a nice, safe car. You can go on an international holiday or two or a couple of holidays per year. You can take care of your family. You can buy lavish gifts. You're kind of taken care of. And this obviously also depends where you live. If you live in the suburbs, making $115,000 a year, that's plenty of money. But if you lived in a very high cost of living city, you lived in New York, you lived in Sydney, you lived in London, you lived in Auckland or Toronto, it doesn't go very far. And so the amount of comfort that you have decreases again, depending on your location. And so the $75,000 a year is not a straight and narrow price point or income point, but it more speaks to the larger idea that after a certain amount of money, your happiness does not increase. And so the desire or the value to be continuously chasing that next promotion and to be breaking your back over trying to get in a company's good books, trying to invest, trying to save every dollar, after a while, the happiness that it provides you really starts to become a lot more fickle. And this is my personal theory. So it's very anecdotal and it's by no way, shape or form scientifically backed. But I find that wealthy people have what I like to call this inconvenience buffer. And the more wealth you have up to that certain point, the larger your inconvenience buffer grows. So when I was a student, I didn't have much of an inconvenience buffer at all because I didn't have extra money. And so if I missed a flight or if I lost $50 or if I just did something, my car, got crashed or I had a dental emergency, those things really affected my day-to-day life. Like they would ruin my week, they'd ruin my month, they'd cause a lot of financial stress, a lot of time stress. And as people get wealthier, their financial position gives them this sort of buffer around inconveniences. Inconveniences still happen. Like a wealthy person can still get their car crashed into. They can still miss a flight. All these annoying things, they can still have dental problems. But because you have this financial buffer around you, it doesn't bother them as much. I realized that as my emergency fund grew and as my investments grew, if I missed a flight, it was embarrassing and annoying, but a wealthy person can call someone up and go, hey, can you rebook a flight for me? A wealthy person can go, oh, that's really frustrating about the insurance, but it'll get covered and I can go rent or lease another car in the meantime. You find that life's problems do not cause you as much stress and harm. And so that's why, again, anecdotal, but that is why I believe that once you reach enough of a level where the buffer exists, the buffer can't really get any more helpful. After a certain point, like, what are you going to do? Have like a concierge doctor that is like with you all the time? Like that doesn't necessarily create a happier life. It just continues to reduce the inconveniences that touch you. But on a day-to-day basis, having a lot more money doesn't necessarily improve our emotional well-being or our happiness. And so that is why you will find that once you start making $100,000 a year, incredible. If you get to $150,000 a year, fantastic. Then you start making $200,000 a year, $300,000 a year, $400,000 a year, like crazy, crazy, crazy amounts of money. But the difference between $200,000 a year and $400,000 a year in salary, even though that sounds so absurd, those two people live, interestingly, a very similar life. They don't have that much difference compared to someone making $50,000 a year and someone making $100,000 a year. Now, the third myth that came up was that earning more money will make you more satisfied with life. Ed Dana had a graph to study the correlation of life satisfaction versus income. So across the x-axis, there was your income, your family income, and across the y-axis was life satisfaction. And he wanted to track that if your family income increased, would your life satisfaction increase in the same amount? And interestingly enough, he found that it actually depended on where you grew up. If you were growing up in a poor nation, then yes, without a doubt, as your family's income increased, your life satisfaction increased, which makes a lot of sense. Like I think about my own family and my parents, and as their family income increased, they were able to do things like instead of having an outhouse and going to the toilet outside in a separate, area, they were able to bring the toilet inside. It was things like being able to afford a fridge in their family home. And so having a fridge then meant that food wasn't perishing. And that created such a better quality of life. That meant being able to install a generator so that when the power in India went off, because it would go off multiple times a day, they could still have a generator to use electricity. And electricity wasn't this sort of fleeting thing that would exist. And that is going to make such a difference in your satisfaction. But if you grow up in a wealthier nation, quote unquote, you grow up in the OECD like New Zealand or Australia or the US or the UK, then as your income increases, Ed was not able to find a strong relationship. There was some relationship, but definitely not a strong relationship of your life satisfaction increasing, which again kind of makes sense. Living in a country like these, if you are considered someone that is at least middle class, increasing your salary doesn't necessarily cause you to have the same impact as going from having a toilet outside to having a toilet inside the house. Going from having like a Toyota to, I don't know, like a Lexus or a Porsche or a Lamborghini, you still have a car either way. And so the satisfaction it brings is not as much as the satisfaction of going from, oh my God, I have a bike to now I have a scooter to now my scooter has turned into a motorbike or now my motorbike has become a car. Those are much greater levels of life change and therefore life satisfaction. But a basic car to a fancy car doesn't result in the same jump that we think it will. And so that's exactly what he kind of tried to portray with his study. The fourth myth that came up was that earning more money will increase your emotional well-being. Not necessarily happiness, but maybe emotional well-being has some kind of impact. And I mean, I don't know if we're surprised at this point, but what they found was that your perceived value of your happiness does go up, as in if you get a pay bump, if you go from $100,000 to $120,000, you're like, oh my God, I am so happy, because you assume your life is better. You're like, well, I'm someone that makes $120,000. I'm someone that makes $200,000. Like, surely I have a better life than someone else. And so your perceived value of happiness goes up, but when your well-being is actually measured, as in when someone asks you, how happy or satisfied are you day to day? How happy or satisfied were you yesterday? Our reaction to that is a lot lower than what we would assume. We kind of think, well, of course I should be happy. Of course my well-being is high. When we actually get checked in, we go, oh, well, I still have crap to deal with and life still has a lot of challenges. This then leads to the question, well, why is it that happiness levels off? Like, why is it that when we look at our happiness, income causes it to increase slightly and then after a while it just does not make sense? And one theory was that maybe we aren't as happy after a certain income level because once our creature comforts are met, once our needs are met, if we cannot maintain the same level of wealth as our peers, we're just going to feel unhappy. And so the study Relative Deprivation and Individual Wellbeing by Z Chen in 2015 found that people who are unable to maintain the same level of living as others around them experienced what's considered a relative deprivation. It has nothing to do with absolute deprivation, but causes quite a strong sense of unhappiness and just lack of contentment. And the study defined relative deprivation as living in conditions where you experience relative poverty, not absolute poverty, but just relative poverty compared to your friends, despite obviously having a striking reduction to absolute poverty, besides having like no level of, oh my God, I could actually be homeless. Relative poverty is like staying at a budget hotel and maybe only traveling once a year while your friends stay at like the Four Seasons or Amman properties or like travel multiple times a year. And it's not absolute poverty. It's not like having, no roof over your head. So in simple terms, the study tried to suggest that if you are someone that has a lot of wealth, maybe on paper, it seems like you actually have a great life. You live in a developed nation. You make a good living. You have a roof over your head. You own your own home. You are able to save up a little bit. You might appear incredibly wealthy to the average person in your own country, but you might not personally feel happy or satisfied because all your friends around you had very wealthy parents. And so they got more of a head start in life. Perhaps they were able to get into a nicer home to begin with because their parents gave them a large deposit, or they're able to, grow in their careers faster, or they sold a company and they've done very well for themselves. And so as soon as we start comparing ourselves to the living standard of our peers, and if we don't meet or maintain that, it just makes us happy. It's like the simple idea of trying to keep up with the Joneses. You buy like 2012 Audi and you're like, oh my God, I'm so happy I have a European car, yeah. And then your neighbor turns up and they have like a 2025 Audi of the same model. And you're like, okay, well, now mine just feels old and stupid and I don't have the nicest stuff and I don't feel as happy about my car anymore. The study also then tried to figure out, well, how does this play out in different countries? Is there some kind of different reaction that people have? And I found that some countries have higher relative deprivation, which is basically, in very simple terms, a larger wealth gap between the richest 20% and the poorest 20%. And I found that if you have a larger relative deprivation, people in that country are more likely to be unhappier because there is more pressure to try to look like the wealthy. There is more pressure for the middle class to spend more money, to have like sort of visual status symbols like handbags or again, cars, holidays, houses. And so it actually creates a lot of strain and unhappiness and really perpetuates this idea of unfairness in a society, which again kind of contributes to what you could be perceived as lower morale. And if you try to think about like, why do our brains do this? Like, why do we torture ourselves by worrying about what other people have? Like, let's just be happy in the fact that you own a home. Let's just be happy in the fact that, you're better off than you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And it comes down to how our brains were, or at least a theory, comes down to how our brains were developed. In the hunter-gatherer societies, it made sense to stick to the status quo. It made sense to be someone that would not deviate from the group. And if you deviated, you were punished, you were asked to leave, and you would have starved to death. And so when we experience relative deprivation, we're not going to be happy because it's kind of tapping into that same hunter-gatherer brain where we go, oh my God, if I don't keep up with my friends, I'm going to die. And so happiness is definitely not a linear relationship with our income. Yes, it improves our quality of life up to a standard, and more so if you live in a country or an area that had a poor standard of living to begin with. But after your needs are met and after you reach those creature comforts, your well-being and life satisfaction and happiness don't really increase significantly after about 115,000 US dollars per year. And if anything, your life satisfaction might start decreasing if you begin to compare your income to those around you, whether it be people online, whether it be people around you. And so to summarize, I guess our parents were right when they said comparison is the thief of joy. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please let me know. Leave a comment below. Subscribe to us on YouTube if you've been watching online. And please, please, please send this to someone that you think could benefit from this video, because the more people that have financial literacy, the more the world becomes a better place, more people have choices, and what else would we want? So with that, I'll see you next week.